New York Association of Psych Rehab Services. And so thank you so much for coming to our kickoff of our legislative days. This will be a version of what we've done for 21 years, so previously in the Egg. And if you know, if you've ever been there, there are, I'll go right to that picture quickly. There. So this is the Egg, and normally we have hundreds and hundreds of people there. And today we're going to get only a portion of that. Some of you are tuning in from programs, so there's more than one of you at the screen, and thank you so much for that. So NIAPRS is our 40th year, our 40th birthday. You'll be hearing more about that a bit later in the year. We're a statewide coalition, a partnership between people who receive and or provide services and people who provide services, recovery-focused services. We have worked all these years in a partnership to advance the recovery, rights, rehabilitation, cultural competence, community inclusion, and criminal justice reform. And you'll of thousands of people with psychiatric disabilities or other ways they want to identify. But we're dedicated to our community, and we're dedicated today to really advancing advocacy. So our goal today will be to provide raise your awareness and hopefully your excitement about presenting these issues to your legislators, whether you have appointments with them later today or throughout the week and a half. We're hoping we'll get a lot of advocacy in before May 5th. So again, I'm going to move on from NIAPRS, and here it is right here. This is our website. This is my email address. Eileen is putting this PowerPoint, the whole PowerPoint is in the chat box. So anything you see in this small version of it will be there. So if you need to go to our website, email me, or if you want to sign up for our daily e-news, which brings all kinds of information to lots of people throughout the state and country, please feel free to join it. These are our co-presidents. I want to introduce you to them. Tracy Plouffe from the North Country and Marguerite Gale from down in New York City. Fabulous leaders, and I just want you to meet them. This is our wonderful staff that are helping make this happen today. Eileen Crosby-Negron is behind the whole scenes for the entire event, and she set up the links, and many of you have been communicating with her. So Eileen, thank you so much for your great work here. Len Statham, thank you, Len, our CEO, done all kinds of work in organizing the participation of people out there, and many other things that Len does to make this day happen. So I want to thank you both. I want to tell you very quickly, NIAPRS has 9 regions, and you see them there, and there's a Finger Lakes, there's a Western New York, there's a Central New York, Southern Tier, North Country, Capital Region, Hudson Valley, Long Island, and New York City. So we encourage you to get involved. These are our regional coordinators. We'll be putting up on the website soon their pictures and their contact information, but I wanted you to see them. And again, you can see this in the PowerPoint in the chat box. Again, this is what the lobby, if we were all together and it wasn't for the virus, we would be here in force. And we would be hearing this program and participating in it, and then folks would disperse around the Capitol and turn Albany either green or yellow or whatever hats we're wearing that year. You'll be hearing our speakers. So I want to acknowledge Carla Rabinowitz, who won't be with us today. She's the woman in the right with the green hat. She's behind a lot of this. She won't be able to be with us, but I really want to salute and acknowledge and thank her for all her work. And you'll soon be hearing from Glenn Liebman. He'll be one of our first speakers. Over the course of the day this morning, we're going to cover 11 issues and have up to 15 or 16 speakers. So all of them are going to talk fast, hopefully not too fast. Hopefully you have this book. This is the first page of the book that we're sending you, and we're sending legislators that we'll be meeting with as well. So if you go to the chat box, you can download this and use this when you meet with your legislators. If you'll email it to them, and then when you get on the call with them, you can refer to this book. Finally, this is the bottom line. This is about people power. We want to really encourage people to take charge. You're representing people who really need you, the voiceless, people who are homeless, people who live behind prison doors, people who live in institutions, and people in the community. So really thank you for all your work today. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I see all our wonderful speakers today. And so I want to open up with a real friend of NIAPR's, someone who's, you all know, if you've been to a conference anytime in the last 20 years or so, Mike Skinner has been doing open mic. He's put on concerts. He's a national hero, particularly around, he writes the journal Surviving Spirit, very focused on healing from trauma. And he's got an opening song to start us off right. So Mike, if you would.
Thank you, Harvey. Hi, folks. I'm going to do a song I wrote. It's called By My Side. And just a little genesis, the backstory to the song. It's a short song. It's about peer support and friendship. And for me, learning about peer support came in the 70s through the mid 80s when I was a traveling musician as a drummer in rock bands. So that was peer support for me. In the 80s, I started attending adult children of alcoholics support group meetings. Again, peer support and friendship. But it was in 92 and 93 when the trauma of the past came back to haunt me and leaving me with PTSD and major depression. But it was the peer support in the mental health centers, the peer support centers, conferences that encouraged me, supported me, and letting me know that, yes, I could play the guitar, because I wanted to pick up the guitar and play and sing. And too many were telling me, oh, you're mentally ill, you'll never work again, blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. But it was the peer support that truly is a major part of my healing journey. So that's why this song was written. It's called By My Side. By my side, I'll walk through pouring rain. I'll face the freezing snow, and I'll fight the gods of war. And I'll hold my head up high, 'cause you're by my side. I feel this sense of peace. I cherish your light of love, and I feel your hand in mine, and it helps to lighten the load. By my side, there are times when life has beaten me down. I find the ways to stand. Once again, you've extended your hand, and I know I'm not alone. You're by my side. By my side. By my side. By my side. I can travel this road, and I know I'm not alone. The shelter from the storm. By my side. And now I want you to know, as we travel this road, I'm extending my hand, your friend for life. I'm by your side, by your side, by your side, by your side. Now carry the light to help show the way. As we travel this road, I'm by your side, by my side, by your side, by my side.
Thank you, Michael. I know there's a lot of people out there clapping for you. Thank you so much. We'll hopefully see you at our conference, hopefully live, but it may very well be virtual. But thanks again so much.
Thank you for having me. Honored.
Anytime. So we are going to go through, by the way, I just want to point out, Michael was talking a lot about peer support, and I just want to make clear that NIAPRS is a peer-led organization. Our board is, I think, almost 60% peers. Most of our staff, including myself, are people in recovery, long-time recovery. So this is very personal to us, and we know many of you, most of you, all of you really. And so this is so important. You're going to take this energy and this information and take it forward. So we're going to go through each of the issues today for about 5 minutes. We're going to have some wonderful experts, advocates, who will be really inspiring us and providing that information. We're going to start right away with Glenn Liebman and Taina Lang, and they'll be talking about the impact of the 5% cuts, actually the withholds that we've been suffering with going back to July, and then the possibility of 5% cuts. So Glenn and Taina. Taina, I see you there. There you are.
Hello.
Good morning. Good morning to you both. So Glenn, do you want to start? You're on mute. Glenn, you're on mute.
Sure. Good morning. Taina, if it's okay with you, I'll start it off.
Please go right ahead.
Right. And I'll just start. I'm Glenn Liebman. I'm director of the Mental Health Association, New York State. Longtime colleagues of Harvey and NIAPRS. We believe so strongly in your mission and the incredible work that you do every day. Working alongside Harvey has been truly one of the greatest gifts of being a mental health advocate. And I've got to say that this has been the most trying year. We all have seen it. We all are very aware of the impact of COVID and racial inequities. And I think more than ever, what's happened is we know the mental impact of COVID, and at the same time that we're going through the worst mental health crisis that frankly we've ever seen, we are also facing budget cuts. It's the worst of all worlds combining together. These cuts to services, and I know, Taina, you're going to talk about the withholds, the impact of the withholds. Since July 1, our community, the counties and transferring again to community providers have faced 20% withholds. And now the budget, as proposed budget comes out and saying, we're going to pay back the withholds. We hope. We're advocating for it. Harvey's advocated for it. I've advocated, many have advocated for it. And there's certainly the great hope. But that said, at the end of the day, we're still facing 5% cuts. That's true of what's going on. Now, hopefully we'll get federal stimulus money of about $15 billion, which the governor's advocating for, and we won't have to worry about the 5%, but the 5% is still out there right now. And we know the devastation, all of us know, because that 5% is really about the community. It's really about peer support. It's really about family engagement. It's about employment programs. It hits to the core of the recovery programs that we've all long advocated for. And we are, as a group, all the behavioral health advocates are working together with one voice to push back on this, because we think at the time of greatest need, the last thing that you should be doing when we're facing a mental health crisis is to cut mental health services. It doesn't make sense. So we're fighting for that. In addition, just briefly, one of the other cuts, and I know Harvey's going to talk about reinvestment, but one of the other things we're facing is a 1% across the board cut to our cost of living adjustments. 1%. We are being hypocritical by cutting that 1%. The people who are doing it, our workforce, are the ones who have been the heroes. They have been out there every day during COVID, fighting COVID. They have been lauded and praised. But at the end of the day, being lauded and being praised is wonderful and it's great, but you got to show us some, money, some funding to recognize, the great work that's being done. And unfortunately, the response has been withholding this 1% increase in funding for the workforce.
So Glenn, just to keep it on 5 minutes, I just want to give Taina a chance. I want to thank you so much for coming out and all your leadership for years, and certainly on this issue and our partnership. Incredible, really incredible. So Taina, you want to say who you are, where you're from, and what the impact of the withholds and potential cuts?
Good morning, everyone. I first want to thank Mike for that wonderful song that he wrote. That's a beautiful way to start the day. Thank you, Glenn. You know, you're a tough act to follow because absolutely all the things that we're going to be discussing is all regarding, you know, all what's been happening on the grounds over here. My name is Taina Lang. I am the new appointed CEO to Baltic Street AEH, Advocacy, Employment, and Housing here in New York City. We service the tri-state area. And let me start off by saying that I have an amazing, amazing group of individuals that I'm proud to say that I work with. In the face of the major adversities that have come down with COVID-19, our services have literally increased 300%. This is almost record breaking for us, for the amount of individuals that we have been able to reach out to in this virtual setting, as now this is the new setting, right? With Zoom and telecalls and mental health, as I like to call it, you know, tele-peer services have been on a rise. So with that being said, this 5% cut that is being proposed by the governor, you can only imagine how devastating this is going to impact our organizations here that are servicing individuals that are in need right now. Mental health is on a rise. It's just on a rise. You know, I hear constant stories of individuals that are feeling suicidal, people that have attempted, and people that are going, unfortunately, mass incarceration because they're losing homes and they're being arrested for loitering, you know, and it's completely and totally and utterly unfair. You know, we're seeing individuals right now that are in need of finding good nutritional foods. They're in the middle of living in food deserts. The use of substance misuse and uses are on a rise, and it's not because of not having, but the fact of being lonely. You know, we're seeing a rise of depression, you know, and we need individuals, the peer workforce, to continue these services, to reach out to every single person that is in seek of some sort of assistance. You know, right now, you know, having to, you know, work through a 20% budget withholding, we had to hold back on hiring individuals for our organizations, which was extremely difficult, especially with the demand that's being brought upon us, having to sustain our technologies and pay for these new technologies, because it's something that we do have to be able to still be able to provide services, you know. So here we are in the midst of this pandemonium, and we're still trying our best to make sure that people stay connected. You know, we have individuals that we service that are suffering from agoraphobia. And here we are now in this virtual setting to give them some sort of hope that we are still here for them. So yes, these budget cuts will be utterly devastating to the population and all of the individuals that we serve. So we just want to make sure that you guys please take your packet, write down on your packet what you're advocating for. Advocate that this, you know, the senator makes this budget whole again, because and continue to actually pay into mental health services. We need to be recognized right now that this workforce needs to actually grow and not shrink. So add funding towards mental health services, and instead
Thank you, Taina.
yes,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. By the way, Taina is coming on our board, and we're so proud of that. We look forward to having you with us, Taina.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be, thank you so much, Glenn and Taina. Now we're going to hear from Kirsten Vincent and myself. So reinvestment, if you may know, you probably know, is a funding stream that was created in 1993, 94, and is derived from the closing of state hospitals or state hospital beds. And over the years, we've seen, probably on a cumulative basis, hundreds of millions of dollars go into the community and create the recovery sector, create the peer support sector, help fund employment and education and family support. We count on those monies. They're in addition. So the 5% is money that's being cut, and the reinvestment is being withheld, money that normally would go to us. And we need that new money. It's new money. And it basically comes from the closure. This year, they're closing 110 beds, which amounts to $22 million that we're going to lose unless we fight to get that money out to the community. So Kirsten, would you talk a little bit about the impact of not getting the money and already on top of being cut or having withholds?
Sure. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you for having me today. When we talk about reinvestment funds, we're talking about programs that are vital to our community and, helping people be independent in the community, making sure that we've filled in gaps in services that are vitally important to people. So for example, in housing programs, housing isn't just about finding someone an apartment or a home. It's about wraparound services that go with that. And that's what part of these reinvestment funds have been paying for, is those wraparound services. Those services help ensure that somebody's got the support that they need and helps ensure that they can stay independent and successful in the community. These reinvestment funds also pay for crisis intervention programming, such as respites, which is something that my agency happens to run. So we know that these respite programs for both children and adults supply a place for somebody to go when they're having a crisis as a way to avoid going to an unnecessary hospital stay, a place where they can come, receive peer support, and work through whatever is they're struggling with. And those are paid for primarily through reinvestment funds. And to lose those services would be very detrimental for people in our community. Without those, there would be more people going to the emergency room when it wouldn't potentially be necessary for them to go to the emergency room. These funds also help support MIT teams and ACT teams, which help again with people in the community stay successful and independent and help people on a daily basis so that they're avoiding those crisis situations so that they don't have to go to an unnecessary hospital stay. And you'll see the theme throughout all of these services is we want to avoid those unnecessary hospital stays, because going to the hospital when you don't need to can be very traumatic for a person, can be re-traumatizing for a person. So these services really support people avoiding those situations.
Thank you, Kirsten, so much. And Kirsten is the director of Recovery Options Made Easy up in Western New York. There's an issue we talk about here. Some groups are not being cut, and our groups are being cut. And let's face it, a lot of the people we serve and support are people of low incomes and many people of color. This is cruel to pick out groups that really need the money most and to cut them while other groups are not being cut. So we really need to get that, as I do when we're at Lobby Day. The first messages you want to say are, we want to restore the 5%, and we want to see reinvestment released so we can grow our services. So thank you, Kirsten. The next issue, Kirsten mentioned housing, and I'm so glad we have Sabrina Barrett with us. She is the director of Association for Community Living, longtime partners of us, longtime supporter of NIAPRS. All those hats we wear always say, more housing. Housing is health, housing is recovery. So Sabrina, thanks for joining us. Would you say a few words about housing?
Sure. Harvey, thank you so much for inviting ACL and Bring It Home to be a part of NIAPRS Legislative Day. I know we can accomplish more together, and we amplify each other's voices when we come together in support of our common causes. My name is Sabrina Barrett, as Harvey said, and I am the Executive Director of the Association for Community Living, which has led the Bring It Home campaign in partnership with many of you. Our goal is to inform policymakers that we need better funding for better care. Mental health housing is more than a roof over one's head. Mental health housing is healthcare and a path to recovery for thousands of New Yorkers who have severe and persistent mental illness. Bring It Home supports the $20 million allocated in the proposed fiscal year 21-22 budget for community-based mental health housing, and we urge that it be allocated as soon as possible. These are not new dollars. These are dollars that were in the 2021 enacted budget, but were never allocated because of the pandemic, meaning that during what was perhaps the most difficult year ever for mental health housing providers, they essentially received a $20 million cut. This money is urgently needed to begin to close the funding shortfall that has gone on for far too long. Before the pandemic, just 1 year ago, mental health housing faced a $180 million shortfall. This is because the funding model, which was created 30 to 40 years ago, has not kept pace with inflation and the changing demands of our community. For example, and some of you are talking about wages, employee health insurance premiums have risen 740% since 1984. Our providers cannot afford health insurance for their staff at the current reimbursement rates. Let's talk about wages. More than 30 years ago, our staff made $6 to $7 an hour, which at that time was double the minimum wage. Today, they make just at minimum wage, meaning they can't afford childcare. At the current wage, staff have to work about 80 hours a month. That's half of the month full-time work just to pay for the childcare for one child. Many have to work more than one job. We are losing staff to fast food restaurants and retail, which can pay them more. Plus, over time, our jobs have become harder as residents' mental and physical needs have grown. Today, staff manage more than a dozen medications, for example, rather than 1 or 2 when these programs started. And now the pandemic has made a bad situation much worse. We have a staffing crisis. We have a 25 to 30% staff unavailability rate. Why? Due to vacancies that cannot be filled due to the low pay, staff who are staying home to care for their children because of the pandemic, and staff who themselves are ill or they have to quarantine. At our recent mental health housing forum, a mental health care worker who makes just $13 an hour described how she, even though she was healthy herself, volunteered to quarantine with 2 residents who were ill with COVID. She slept on a cot in a small office for just 3 to 4 hours a night. She was all those residents had for 2 weeks. At our forum, she posed this question: would you risk your life for $13 an hour? She did. Our staff are on the front lines of COVID, and their dedication and creativity save lives. Because residents have co-occurring medical conditions, of those who become ill, more than 45% required hospitalization and more than 15% died. We know the loss could have been much higher, but for the heroic efforts of our staff. Our jobs are harder and they pay less. No one is applying for our jobs. Even when unemployment was at its highest levels, people needed jobs, but no one wanted our jobs. This impacts recovery. I spoke to a former resident whose recovery time more than doubled because of staff turnover. She had more than 10 different staff members over the course of her treatment. And just when she began to build trust with a staff member and progress in her recovery, that staff member would leave and she would have to start over from square one. We know New York faces a tough budget year, but the $180 million gap in funding for community-based mental health housing remains. The $20 million allocated for housing is a start to closing this gap. This funding is crucial for New York to be able to live up to its obligation to promote strong mental health housing programs. Finally, mental health housing is not only the right thing to do, it's fiscally smart. As I've seen people post in the chat, it is much less expensive than hospitals, prisons, and homeless shelters. None of those options provide a path to recovery like mental health housing. We save lives and we save money. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. I want to point out, not only is it the right thing to do and the cost-effective to do, it's the law. According to the ADA, that people have to be housed in the most integrated setting. So we have all 3. It's critical. Housing is health and recovery. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to move to one of the most compelling and most egregious issues I've ever worked on, and the NIAPRs have been supporting, and that has to do with criminal justice. Several years ago, we worked to limit the use of solitary confinement with people with more major mental health conditions. But now we're all in all the way, and we have this tremendous, so inspiring advocates, Jerome Wright and Natasha White. So Jerome, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Harvey, and happy 40th birthday to NIAPRs. I think 40 is the number of biblical proportions, so I'm expecting that some real blessings will come this year for all the things we're advocating for today, including solitary. So let me just say, the criminalization of mental illness is an abomination on this nation and on the state of New York. And the criminalization of mental illness in prison is confinement. Solitary confinement is an incubator of mental illness. Prisons alone promote mental illness in and of themselves, and they visit trauma on you. But you want to add insult to injury, then what we do now is we encourage, expose, and exacerbate mental illness by use of solitary confinement for weeks, months, years, and decades on individuals. The real trauma now is COVID-19 has taken this to another dimension. They're now using solitary confinement as medical quarantine and isolation, something that is even more damaging and detrimental to the health and well-being of people in solitary confinement. It is a racial issue. It is no question that it is disproportionately used in Black and Brown and Latinx people. We know that 18% of the state is Black. Almost 50% are in prison, but we have almost 60% of our brothers and sisters in solitary confinement. Mental illness needs treatment and therapy, not trauma and torture. And that's what you get. It is time now. 8 years we have been fighting this battle, and NIASPRS has been with us all along the way. We love and appreciate your support, but it is now time. 8 is enough. 8 is too much. We are losing too many men, women, and children to this scourge. And mental illness is being criminalized at an all-time high by the usage of solitary confinement.
Thank you, Jerome.
Change this.
Sorry, you're the last person I want to stop because your energy is so powerful.
Thank you.
Jerrome's right, we are very close to the campaign for alternatives to isolated confinement, or CAIC. We're tremendous supporters of the HALT bill. You see that on Natasha's shirt. I was on a call and she was so powerful. I think you have a personal story or personal example to give, Natasha.
Absolutely. First, I want to say good morning and thank you, everyone. I am community organizer for HALT Solitary Confinement and a directly impacted survivor of solitary confinement. My husband did 12 years in solitary, and he has never been diagnosed with mental illness, but he definitely has a mental disability. He came home very violent and angry. I almost lost my life in my home. And the ironicness is, you know, even with the HALT bill, we're trying to stop them from putting people with mental illness in solitary confinement, but just being in solitary confinement can cause mental illness. So how does that help? Like, solitary needs to end, period. It is torture, it's ineffective, and it's inhumane. I suffer from intermittent explosive disorder. So imagine me in my household in a violent relationship. It is not healthy for either one of us. It changed my life tremendously, and I suffer to this day. You know, the sad part is, what does mental illness look like to people? Some mental illness you can't see. You can't see it. So, you know, on a daily basis, I'm struggling in my household with my husband, not understanding what the issue is. I mean, you're home, you got a good woman, you got a good job. What's the problem? Mental illness is not written across people's foreheads. You know what I'm saying? So the support needs to be there. As far as housing is concerned, housing is a human right. You know, being cared for is a human right. We are humans. We should treat each other with love, dignity, and respect. So for you to lock somebody in a cage and say it's justified is crazy. That's crazy. You know, that's not even mental illness. That's what you call just sick. You know, you can't lock a dog in the garage for 24 hours without the police knocking on your door. So how do you justify locking somebody who has the same rights as a human being as you? How do you justify that? You can't. It's impossible. 8 is enough. Get it done. 2021. It's got to go. HALT
Thank you,
Solitary.
Natasha. Thank you so much. Jayed is a member of our board. And Jayed, will you put your camera down a little bit so we can see your whole face? And I know you have.
I can.
I think you're going the wrong direction there. We're losing your face now. But if you have
Yeah.
you have a minute or two of a poem to say, you want to read it? We'll see your face later. Right now, we got to keep the program going.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for attending today, and thank you for having me speak. I happen to be Jay Lansbury. I'm the Long Island Regional Co-Coordinator for NIAPRS, and I'm also the Criminal Justice Chair for the National Alliance of Mental Health New York State. Most importantly, I'm the mother of a survivor who is my son that turned around and spent 2.5 years in solitary as a youth. But I got to tell you, solitary confinement ups the chances of suicide by 94%. And almost 48% of the people that are in solitary confinement have suffered with a serious mental illness. And if you don't have a mental illness when you go in, you're going to definitely have one when you come out.
So Jayette, I have to wrap up the Holt section. Do you have a poem you want to read?
Excuse me?
Do you have a poem you want to read? We're going to have to close up the Holt section.
I have a poem I'm going to read that really hits home. It's called Time in Solitary. Door slam, here we go again. Sounds of banging and voiceless cries. Hours stretch into endless nights into hours, months, days, and years. Will I see my mom again? She loves me beyond. Will I die? Never to know life again. Alive but dead. Feel like living death. Should I try suicide or should I survive? Why, oh why? It was written by my son.
Thank you, Jayette. I know what a strong and present and loving mother you are and how much that means to him. The Holt bill would basically end solitary confinement for our community and other vulnerable groups. It would create rehabilitation cells, not these little elevator-sized rooms with little windows where you get out 1 hour a day. It would really expand the amount of treatment. So it's treatment, not torture. And I want to thank Jerome and Natasha and Jayette so much. They are the most amazing advocates. They come up all the time and they're not compromising because one person in the box is too much for our community. So thank you all. I want to move to, I'm going to take a couple of issues, Ruth and Cameron, to make them quickly. NIAPRS has been against forced treatment from our very, very beginning. And since the passage of Kendra's law, which basically predicts that someone may cause or come to harm and forces people into treatment, not of their choosing. And this is a program that, like I say, really has used the courts and police to do the things that the mental health system should be doing. We are accountable. We know how to do this. We must do this. We must really certainly limit any expansion in AOT or assisted outpatient treatment, and that's what we're pushing for this year. There's also another form, even worse. There's a form of involuntary inpatient commitment. Right now, you can be admitted only to a hospital if you're a danger to self or others against your will. But the budget would expand that to general vague terms like likelihood to result in serious harm, likely, which would allow individuals experiencing neglect, basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter. People need clothing, food, and shelter, not a hospital bed, and not against their will. So, we are hopeful that the legislature is hearing us and is going to walk away from both forced treatment. We've gotten good encouragement, but we need you out there. We need you out there to make sure people's rights and dignity is protected. And the mental health system takes responsibility for knowing how to engage and support people, and that we keep help out of the courts and away from the police who don't want it anyway, and where there's too many tragedies. So far, I just want to summarize. Restore 5% cut to existing services, put new money in the system, 22 million, keep the 20 million for housing in the budget, stop the Holt bill, pass the Holt bill and stop the torture. And by all means, stop any attempts to expand either inpatient or outpatient treatment. Here are some real friends of ours. We have Cameron Farash, a board member, and Ruth Lowenkron, a great friend and new partner. We talked until 9 o'clock last night working on this stuff. So this is an incredibly important issue. You hear all about the tragedy and the violence when we send police out for a job they shouldn't be doing. And Ruth is part of a coalition in New York City that changed their name to make the point that we need to do this better. So Ruth, would you open up with a couple of words?
Sure. Thanks so much, Harvey. Yes, Harvey and I are newfound best friends, and we've been shouting at the folks in the state legislature. We're really doing great things. I modestly say about myself, but very, very passionately say about Harvey. Before I just talk about what I'm supposed to be talking about, since you led with the problems with commitment and Kendra's law, I just wanted folks to know that my office has prepared an electronic action alert that I hope Harvey's going to make available to everybody with a simple click. And I really mean this. This takes less than 1 minute. You can get an email into the hands of the most critical elected officials to tell them no commitments, expansions, no Kendra's law expansions. And it also has a mention of the failure to serve people in adult homes. So please, when you get that, act on it and send it around broadly. So I'm the replacement for Carla, which obviously is an impossible task. She's the best, and I know that because she and I have been working 4.5 years on this issue. From literally the moment I arrived at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, which was formerly the Protection and Advocacy Office in New York City, and now does a broad swath of disability advocacy. I have been involved in this issue. My office has been involved in this issue. So what is the issue? The issue is, as Harvey said, that people who experience mental health crises are not able to receive the appropriate response to the crisis. Their only option is to call 911. 911 brings the police, and the statistics are repulsive. The statistics in New York City, the last 5 years alone, 16 people shot and killed at the hands of the police experiencing a mental health crisis. And I'm not even talking about the people who were shot but not killed, but 16 shot and killed. And then, just so you are clear on this, as you might suspect, the racial impact, huge. Of those 16 people, 14 of them people of color. So you get what the issue is. I'm sure Carla's been preaching it every time she talks to you. So I just want to update you on what is happening in this area, and there is a lot. So for one thing, the group that Harvey alluded to, CCIT-NYC, which now stands for Correct Crisis Intervention Today, New York City, has its own proposal of what an appropriate crisis response should look like. It eliminates the police entirely. All modesty, it is wonderful. It is the way to go. We've been talking it up all over. Not so clear that we've been properly heard by everybody, because New York City, the agency Thrive, has come up with its own proposal, hugely problematic. Happy to go into details with folks afterwards, but I have my just few minutes, so I just want to alert you to these things. So we're still fighting that. In the meanwhile, the city council has come up with proposed legislation. Also problematic, less so. We think it's manageable. We just had a hearing yesterday, and we really feel like we might have been heard, that the legislators who offered it really said, oh, we hear you, tell us how to make it better. And we think that's doable. So that's exciting. And I also just wanted to alert you, and I guess this is my segue to Cameron, whom I don't know and happy to be the co-speaker with today, that there is also action on the state front, and that's what Cameron will talk about. But just one more second on that. We have been very active on the state front ourselves, talking with Senator Parker. He had put some legislation out there as a placeholder, if you will. It had a lot of problems. We worked on it with him. And then all of a sudden, thank goodness that they were able to work so quickly out of Rochester. Senator Broke and Assemblymember Bronson started working on what they had actually sort of beat us to the finish line on, put out there, called Daniel's Law. I'm not that familiar with it, so all the more reason to turn over to Cameron to talk about that. But we are going to make this happen now.
You know, Cameron is from Rochester. He's on board member 2. Senator Brooke will be talking later about, you know, the attention she's giving to alternatives to police. And Cameron, do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, Ruth, thank you so much for all that information and your passion. I just want to speak a little bit to providing, offering peer support versus the police. And I like to use the analogy that there's actually 2 analogies, but the second one I'm stealing from a coworker who said that was okay. So basically, the first one is I wouldn't hire a mechanic if I have a cavity. And so, you know, like a mechanic, obviously, if you have a cavity, they might be able to do something, but it's probably going to be more harm than good. And then a coworker actually had one that went a little bit further and said I wouldn't hire a gas tank trucker to respond to a fire. And obviously, we know what would happen with that. It would just make it much worse. So, you know, I just have a couple more words in regards to peer support versus police response. And this is generally speaking, but peer support obviously looks through the lens of compassion, whereas unfortunately, due to the training or due to being burned out as a police officer, people are immediately criminalized. And we know the stigma that goes along with criminalizing someone who's going through a mental health or addiction crisis. And really the amazing difference that the person would experience having an opportunity to be de-escalated versus escalated by the police. To me, it's a no-brainer. Interaction through a peer support being healing and connective versus by a police officer, unfortunately, being triggering and traumatizing.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you both so much. I'm sorry to cut it short. So let me summarize again. When you're talking to your legislators, restore the money to services, allow new money from reinvestment to come in, maintain the money for new housing, stop the torture of solitary confinement, fund peers and the EMTs instead of the police, first responders, oppose any expansion of forced treatment, whether it's inpatient or outpatient. One of the things that's in the bill, in the budget bill, that's a good alternative, Ruth and I talk about it all the time, is crisis stabilization programs, which is where people should be going instead of to hospitals and emergency rooms or dealing with police to any large degree. So Steve Miccio is a national leader, both in developing the crisis respite programs, which are all over New York and really the country. But now Steve has been really taking over a crisis stabilization program. And the governor's bill says something about crisis stabilization. We want to have it taken out of the section that appears to make it forced treatment and to really expand the use of recovery-focused voluntary crisis stabilization. So Steve, if you could turn on your camera and say a few words.
My video won't start, but can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't have control of my video for some reason. Hi, yeah. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here. And thanks, Harvey, for having me on. The best way to think of a stabilization center, the way I designed it and the way we work it in Dutchess County, is that it's a wellness hub. And it's a place for people to go in any type of crisis that they would normally go to an emergency room for. And we can work with you. And when I say we, my organization is People USA. We are 100% peer run, and we're the operator now of the stabilization center that we designed back in 2017. So it's open 24/7. People can come anytime. They're greeted by my staff of people with lived experience. And it's a very trauma-informed environment. It's comfortable. It looks nice. We make sure we provide your basic needs for you, and we ask what happened, what brought you to us, and how can we help? And within 24 hours, we get you connected to an appropriate service in the community that's going to help you. And again, it's not any type of force that's involved in it. It does have clinicians. In fact, most of the clinicians are people with lived experience. Not every one of them is. We have CASACs that work there. We have a case manager that's there. We have family and children clinician that's also there, so we can serve across the lifespan, anybody that walks in. And we're very well connected with the community. So the work we've done is very integrated, and within those 24 hours, we can pick up the phone and say, we have someone here that's interested in coming to your service. Can we get them to your service? And within 24 hours, we make sure that they get there. If we have to transport, we will, but they generally would transport themselves to get to it. So I think it's really been a great experience for us on helping people avoid the hospital, avoid the trauma of hospitals, and to really think about their crisis differently because they're treated so differently and they're treated with dignity and respect. And it's been just an amazing experience. Now, I know there's talk about CIT and police and things like that. And unfortunately, CIT, or fortunately, CIT can be used as a good education for police when you don't have peers engaging people in community. And we've done a lot of that CIT training in our community, where police now understand that people have choices, not forced, but they have choices for places to go to. And it's been really successful in our community, where police have brought people to the stabilization center. They just introduce us to the individual and they go on their way, they're done. So it's a less traumatic way for the police to engage someone. But you're right, the answer is not for police to be our first line of engagement. And that's something I work hard to also prevent and make sure that the system itself, the mental health system, if you want to call it that, should really be the ones that are engaging people first.
And I want to say that Steve's model is really being seen not only by us but the state has been really taking in, but God bless them for doing that, taking in information and looking at that. So what we want, the budget language really doesn't say that, but I think the state is starting to really look at how to explain what they mean. And it's much closer to what Steve means. There's still some, maybe some tweaks, but we're talking about voluntary crisis stabilization. It's so critical. And Steve, thank you for the tremendous work you're doing. And I think you're the gold standard. You're the best practice, and thank you for being that. And we really look for the state to fund these and to create the kind of program we want and to fund it adequately. So thanks, Steve. Sorry to rush you.
Thank you.
The next issue, we've been supporting adult home residents for so many years. Adult home residents were wrongly and unjustly placed in these for-profit homes that were not created for them. There's been a long string of stories of abuse or neglect. Jeff Lieberman, and I don't know if Jeff, who you brought with you, is that Roberto? Jeff Lieberman,
yes,
and
Diana Villa and Roberto Rodriguez. There they are.
So they'll introduce themselves, but they've been real champions, and we want to put their advocacy. But the governor eliminated their advocacy money at a time when they needed it most, when COVID is devastating these homes. So Jeff, would you want to talk about this?
Thank you so much, Harvey, and for your and IAPRS's wonderful alliance and support of adult home residents for many, many years, going back to the 2000s when Cliff Levy came out with his devastating Pulitzer Prize-winning report on adult homes. And unfortunately, some of these terrible disconnects continue with the state's failure to support adult home residents. Adult home residents have suffered a terrible year of isolation, sickness, and death from COVID-19. Even before the pandemic, residents in many adult homes have long endured substandard conditions and neglectful or abusive treatment, particularly in what we call impacted or transitional adult homes, which are large facilities that primarily warehouse residents with mental health disabilities. Residents in these facilities rely on the information, organizing, legal representation, and advocacy funded through the New York State to protect their rights, become more independent, and improve the quality of life and care in facilities. Now, unbelievably, residents face losing these vital advocates through very cruel and unwarranted funding cuts. For decades, state appropriations have enabled our organization, the Coalition of Institutionalized Aged and Disabled, Family Service League, Mobilization for Justice, and Nassau Suffolk Law Services to advise and advocate for thousands of facility residents annually. Every year, advocates conduct dozens of trainings for thousands of residents, advocate for roughly 1,300 residents to resolve their individual concerns, promote collective action in resident councils, represent residents at benefit hearings and in eviction proceedings, and engage in impact litigation and policy advocacy to improve residents' lives and help them live more independently.
Thank you, Jeff. Can we hear from,
Sure.
hear from Roberto? And you folks want to say a word or two? I think you're on mute right now. There you go.
Hi, my name is Diana. I have a psychiatric diagnosis like many of you. And when I first arrived at Bell Harbor Manor in Rockaway, Queens, I was beaten down by the mental health care system in New York City. I was just happy to have a roof over my head, a warm bed, and food to eat. I was just happy to feel safe. One day, I went to a workshop given by CIAD and MFJ to inform residents of their rights. Rights? I didn't know I had rights. I had always been an advocate for students at the college where I used to work. And in my personal life, I began to advocate for my fellow students. CIAD supported me in all my efforts as a vice president of the resident council, as food committee chairperson, and then as the president of the resident council, and now as a peer advocate for CIAD. As president, I worked to ensure that residents had a voice in how the Equal Grant was spent. And this was very important because residents said they needed clothes. So we helped them get a clothing allowance from the grant for the first time. That year, we got $50 each. Last year, we got $200. Since the pandemic isolated us from providing workshops and provide services to residents in my home, I started a newsletter, which I created each month. Now I help to create a newsletter for CIAD too, for all the residents at all the homes that all the adult homes that CIAD helped to support. Thank you.
My name is Roberto. I can say my job as a peer advocate from CIAD. I also live at an adult home, and I also had a meeting with JK and Jeff also, and they explained to me about my rights, and I said I felt that we felt neglected living in an adult home, and I said I wanted to get involved. We started to have our support groups there at the facility, and ever since the pandemic came, we were isolated. We couldn't go out nowhere, so we felt abandoned. So one thing I would like to say that the CID has started a support line, and I really feel that I'm part of the support line, helping the residents talk. Sorry, I help the residents talk to us like ourselves that work with CIAD, and I truly feel that we cut the budget, we'll lose the support line, because a lot of us, we need to talk because we don't have families to talk to, or we're not able to talk to families. Myself, I don't have a family. I was raised by myself, so having the support line, I can identify with a lot of the residents that live in a nursing home.
Hi, Harvey.
Hi,
Can you hear
Commissioner.
me?
We're just finishing up. So listen, I'm sorry to cut you short, Roberto and Diana and Jeff, but thank you so much for your advocacy. And again, the advocacy here is restore advocacy funding to Coalition of Institutes Aged and Disabled and other such groups. It's in your book. Your book is in a chat box. Eileen, if you could put back in the links for the advocacy book, that would be great. It's my pleasure to introduce, and I'm glad, Commissioner, you're able to join us today. And I know you've got a stacked up schedule. So we're going to hear now from the Commissioner of Mental Health, Ann Sullivan. Dr. Ann Sullivan. And I think you're hear you.
Okay, it's okay now? I just unmuted. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Harvey. And thank you for having me here today. It's a real pleasure to meet with all of you. I just want to, first of all, just thank you for everything you do all year long, and especially on these advocacy days. I think I've said many times how important your voice is. Your voice is critical. People up here in government listen to you much more sometimes than they listen to me. So they really want to hear from you. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for raising your voice. Thank you for being a part of this advocacy movement, because I know time is precious. And when you give your time to this, you're doing something really very, very special. So there's just a few things I'd like to say today. And before I get into a few things about the budget, I would just like to emphasize the vaccine program that we have at OMH, that basically we have 8 hub sites of our PCs that are available to provide the vaccine to providers who see clients, but also to clients if you're eligible. And you're eligible if you're over 65, and you're eligible if you have any of those list of disease of chronic comorbid conditions that make you eligible. Things like any kind of pulmonary disease, heart disease, including hypertension, obesity, diabetes. And if you have any of those comorbid conditions, you are eligible for the vaccine now. So please just go to our website, omh.ny.gov. And you can sign up for an appointment, and we have appointments available. So if you are eligible, please utilize that. There's a lot of hesitancy still out there about the vaccine, but we at OMH, we have vaccinated over 11,000 people, and we've had no adverse effects, no significant adverse effects. And across New York State, 2 million people have gotten the vaccine with very good results. So please consider it. If you haven't already, and if you're eligible, go to our website. We do have at the various hubs, we have vaccine appointments available, and they're like gold right now. Lots of places you can't get vaccines, but if you work for OASIS, OMH, or OPW, and you need the vaccine, or if you are eligible as a client, if you have any of those coexisting conditions or age, if you're eligible like me at over 65, then you can also get the vaccine. Now, a few quick things about the budget. First of all, thank you all for your advocacy relative to the budget, but a couple of things. First of all, I think even in these difficult times, it's been pretty good for housing, which is one of the most critical issues that we have. So basically there is $20 million to support the stipends for housing. There's 50, which brings us up to $70 million to support housing stipends for supported housing over the last 5 years. So that's pretty impressive. It also involves $50 million in capital that will go out to make sure our housing stays safe and that we have good housing, and that $50 million in capital is there. Housing did not get the 5% reduction, even though we know that that 5% reduction is there for other services, but the 5% reduction could be rolled back if we get enough money from the feds. And also, one other thing about housing is that we've also got money and capital for building some crisis served beds as well. So there's a lot with housing, and that's very, very positive. We're also going to be closing some psych beds, only if they're vacant and only if we're able to close them. I know there's an issue with your concern about reinvestment, and that has been withheld for this year. However, it is on the books for the future. So I just want to emphasize that even though it's being held back for this year, there will be reinvestment for those 200 beds if we close the 200 beds by 2022. So please just know that the money's kind of in the bank. Maybe can't be spent this year, but will be able to be spent next year. Another important thing is the integration of OMH and OASAS. And I think that this is something, that you guys have been asking for a long time. We had a whole host of stakeholder meetings over the course of this year. And all those stakeholder meetings were universally positive about the collaboration and the integration of the two agencies. So I hope that you'll support that. And I think that will be good for everyone, because the most important thing is when you walk in the door for help, that the help you need is there. And that brings me to another, I think, important piece of the budget, which are the crisis centers. Just to be clear, the crisis centers are really, they're like kind of psych or mental health urgent centers. You know how when you don't want to go to the ED, but you're really not feeling very well, you might go to an urgent center instead of having to wait and sit in the waiting room of the ED. Well, that's what these crisis centers that we're proposing are. And there's a couple of models already out there to be looked at. So you can take a look. Steve Michio is doing one in Dutchess County. We have something called the DASH model on Long Island. And the crisis centers, they are voluntary. The vast majority of people come are either walk-ins or brought by their families to the crisis center. Sometimes law enforcement might ask someone, would you like to go to the crisis center? But it's totally voluntary. They're 24/7, heavy peer participation. Peers are going to be a big part of developing these crisis centers and of being present in the crisis centers. And they're welcoming spaces where people can come in, they can kind of rest if they need that. They have quiet areas. They're for adults and kids. So this is one of the arms of the rapid response kind of crisis system that we haven't had in New York State, and we need to grow it, and we need to have it there for everybody to use. So it's really there for the immediate use, and it's so much better for most people than going to an emergency room. We all know what it's like to go to an emergency room and wait and then be kind of hustled around with all kinds of problems that happen in emergency rooms. So these are quiet, welcoming centers where people can come when they're in crisis and get immediate attention. Don't wait, there's no waiting time, there's no appointments, you can just walk in. So please, I hope that you'll be able to think about supporting those, because I think that they would be really very helpful in the crisis system. If you have any questions about them, to just ask us so that we'll be glad to share. And then I know that there's another one that I think you guys are not too happy with, which is the self-directed care. And I do want to say this, that the model in the pilot for self-directed care only reached about 150 to maybe 180 clients a year and was extremely expensive. We are not abandoning self-directed care. We want to look at another way to do it so that we can reach more people. And we will be working with Harvey and with others around this. I think self-directed care is valuable, it's important, but I don't think that pilot was reproducible. It was just unrealistic, I think. But we will definitely, the individuals who are in it, we will be taking care of them. But we want to really make it something that's available to many more than that small number of individuals. So we'll be working with you on that as we go forward, and we'll be planning for that. And then just one other piece of good news, I just want to mention that Harvey is on the MISC, the Most Integrated Setting Coordinating Council. And what I can say to you is that his voice is so valuable, and he certainly brings your needs forward. And it's just my pleasure to have him have joined us on the MISC and to work with us going forward. So
thank you, Commissioner.
I'll kind of stop there.
Your leadership, I want to say to folks, has been really terrific. You're so responsive, and your work on the MISC, which is the Olmsted body, folks. It's the appointed body to try to ensure that people live and work in the most independent setting. Commissioner's been a real champion. I want to thank you. We have everybody here for that. So thank you, Commissioner.
Okay,
We now
thank
have,
you. And so that's it. I'm done. So
with all due respect, we do have to, we're tight, we're running late today. So did you want to say anything more, Commissioner?
no, I don't, but just thank you. Another big thank you to everybody. And please, if you're eligible, get the vaccine. I'll just end with that. Thank you so much, Harvey. Thank you.
Yes, you're saving lives with that, Commissioner. And please do follow up with your providers and others that, to get the vaccine at the state psych centers, whatever. We have Kerry Neifeld here, who is in the governor's office. She's the lead person for health and mental health, and she reports directly to the governor. So Kerry, I know how busy you are, and if you want to come on for a second or two, we're happy to have you.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. Hi, Harvey. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. I was saying yesterday that you're a tough act to follow, and it certainly is true. So I just want to thank everyone for having me. And I have about 10 minutes, and then I can chat for a little bit after that if there's anything that folks want to chat about. But thanks again, Harvey and NIAPRS, for having me. And I want to start, I think, where the commissioner ended, which is asking everybody to get their vaccine. And I want to start by thanking and just really acknowledging, that the governor really has relied on the Office for Mental Health to take a really key role in administering vaccine. And right from the very beginning, right, are the folks that we serve in congregate residential settings were prioritized. The staff in those settings were prioritized. Very quickly, additional staff, in a more ambulatory or outpatient setting were prioritized, and the Office for Mental Health has done an incredible job of making vaccine available, getting vaccine out there, and will continue to do that. So if you don't know how to get vaccine, if you need help getting vaccine for your program or for your service recipients, then please reach out to OMH, because they are using the 23 psych centers across the state. They're doing mobile pods, they're doing community clinics, really with the effort of making sure that folks get vaccinated. And I think at this point, although I know that individuals who are receiving services in an outpatient setting have not yet been prioritized, the list of comorbidities is very broad, so that probably does bring a lot of the folks that we serve into eligibility. So if you have any questions about that, I'm available as a resource, and certainly the Office for Mental Health is available as a resource. And I think that it's in recognition and just of the toll that that COVID has taken on our providers, on our programs, on our essential staff, and really want to help protect those folks. I also think that COVID has shined a light on, and the governor has brought a lot of attention to just the issues in general of mental health and mental well-being. For folks who didn't previously experience mental health issues, the pandemic has brought on concerns, and for folks who had previously had mental health issues, it has maybe exacerbated those. And I think that it's been an opportunity to really bring the conversation, to elevate the conversation around mental health and around mental well-being, and to just one more opportunity to reduce the stigma around having those conversations, and around acknowledging that we all have mental health needs. We all have to take care of our mental wellness. And if there is any silver linings, and I think there have been some silver linings, that's one of them. And I think that anytime we have an opportunity to bring into the full public the conversation around mental health and mental well-being, we should take advantage of that. And again, the Office for Mental Health has really done a great job of supporting individuals through the pandemic, essential staff, through coping circles, through the text line, through the crisis line, and will continue obviously to do so. So that's another thing I wanted to mention. I think, despite the challenges of the upcoming budget year, I think this year's budget does do a lot of things that I want to highlight, make sure that folks are aware of, and if you have any questions, be able to answer. I think first, another one of those sort of silver linings, which I hate using that phrase, but another opportunity that COVID has presented is really the opportunity to take advantage of telehealth in both the mental health and the substance use systems, and really be, to help make sure that services are available, they continue to be available, and telehealth has really been proliferated through our systems. And I think the governor has an Article 7 proposal in the executive budget to continue to allow for a lot of those same flexibilities to make sure that telehealth services are still available. And I think for us, as we move forward, we can start to think about how does telehealth help to support some of the shortages that we see in our system, right? I think we often see we have a lack of, psychiatrists or specialty psychiatrists. And I think this is one of the ways that we can look to try to bolster the system through telehealth. And so I'm excited to see over the next year, 2 years, as we continue to design best practices around telehealth, what that can do and how that can support the folks that we serve. I think the budget continues eShy, which has been great and has really gotten a lot of supportive housing units out into the community. It continues it for another year. Which is part of the governor's, overall commitment to 20,000 units of supportive housing. We're well on our way. We've created over our first 5 years goal, which was 6,000. We're closer to 7,000 and on our way to completing the 20,000 goal in 15 years. So eShy continues an additional $20 million in the OMH budget to support existing housing. Continues. And I think when I joined, Dr. Sullivan was talking about some of the other proposals that OMH has in, which is the Crisis Stabilization Center proposal, which would allow us to create a model that's fundable by Medicaid, that the Office of Mental Health can license. And I think Dr. Sullivan touched on the highlights, right? That we're really trying to think about this as an urgent care center for individuals who are in crisis. And I think we've seen lots of examples across the state of how our current system of serving folks who are in crisis is not always is not always doing what we need it to do, right? It's failing individuals. And I think we want to create something across the state that can be that first point for an individual who's in crisis. So we can avoid law enforcement calls. We can avoid, trips to the emergency department that end with someone sitting and waiting for services. This can be a 24/7 full stop shop for anybody who is experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis. I think, and Dr. Sullivan said, right, we're building off of models that are already successful. We have the DASH Center in Long Island, we have the Dutchess County model, which I know is coming under new management and has been taken over by Steve Michio and his group. So I think we have really successful models to build on and to be able to expand that statewide. And really the idea is meant to, it's meant to be one more community-based option for services. And so anything that you all can do to help us support that initiative with the legislature and help make sure that they understand what we're trying to do, I think would be great. And I think, the fact that we have, several really successful models across the state already can show, what we can do when we can, Medicaid this, right? And then expand it across the state. And then the other proposal that I think is really important that I've spent a lot of time working on over the past year is the proposed creation of a new agency that would blend the Office of Mental Health and blend the Office for Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Support. Sorry, I botched the name because it just recently changed, but OASIS, you know who I'm talking about. So again, I think this is another really important proposal that can just help to strengthen the network of services that we provide. We know that there's a lot of crossover already between people that are, receiving services through the mental health system and receiving services through the substance abuse system. And it's just one more opportunity for us to create more access, to create more integration, to create, sort of a no wrong door approach to providing services. And I think that coupled with another of the budget proposals, which would create a single licensure for mental health, substance use, and primary care, which builds off of the district model already that already is out there, just continues to sort of, and I think, right, it's just another opportunity for awareness, right? That the same way that we attend to our primary care needs, the same way that we do, the same way that we have a physical every year, we should be at every opportunity taking stock of how are we doing with our mental health? Where is our mental wellness? And this opportunity for single licensure is just one more way to break down those silos and to be able to have that conversation. So when you're seeing your primary care doc can also talk to you about your mental health needs, or when you're seeing your mental health provider, they can talk to you about your primary health needs, so that we can continue to sort of look at that full spectrum of health and that, that fully integrated individual, right? Because I'm not siloed, right? My mental health needs impact my physical health needs and vice versa. And when my providers are siloed, it can be really challenging. And I think you guys know that better than I do. So,
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Karen.
So no, I was going to say, I think, those are some of the things that I think are highlights this year. I'm happy to chat a little bit if you guys want to. I'm not sure what how you're running things today, Harvey, but also
Yeah,
just want to again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, so much. I know how busy you are around budget. We're actually conceivably hard to know if we're running ahead or behind of schedule. So, maybe we can take 2 questions for Carrie in the governor's office. Does anybody have 2 questions? Then we're going to put on self-directed care. 2 questions? Okay, not fast enough. All right, Carrie, thank you very much. I
Thank you,
appreciate you
guys.
coming on. We have
Okay.
more to do.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Okay, Doug Hovey and Keith, would you guys come on and talk about, we just were hearing from the commissioner about self-directed care, and I know NIAPRS joins you both. Both of you, Community Access and Independent Living, are NIAPRS member agencies, and we've worked on self-directed care a long time. I think it's the most transformative program we have. Commissioner was indicating that in the budget, some of that funding is eliminated. So we're all very concerned about that. So Doug, do you want to kick it off?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Harvey. And my head is reeling from all of the great topics and presentations this morning. And thank you for putting together a great program. The self-directed care project is another critically important project. not only just in what it's been able to accomplish for a small number of folks, there's been maybe under 400 people that have been served since the inception, but because of its potential impact statewide. There's other programs around the nation that are having great success with the self-directed care pilots and programs. If you look back historically, you go back 30 years, New York State passed a self-directed home care model for people with significant physical disabilities, a slight different variation on the same theme. And if you look back 10 years ago, in the OPWDD system for people with developmental disabilities, right? New York created a self-directed self-direction program that is for people with developmental disabilities. There's great potential for us right now to keep the momentum with the self-directed care pilot in New York State for people with mental health disabilities. But we've got to work through the difficulties of transitioning this to HCBS, home and community-based services, to a waiver program where Medicaid ultimately embraces this as a managed care benefit. And it's always difficult. I remember 30 years ago how difficult it was to get the self-directed care program passed for people with physical disabilities. And I remember 10 years ago how difficult it was to get this, pushed through. And it's not always easy working through the bureaucracies and the red tape and the difficulties, but we really have to stay focused. This program allows people to take control over their own lives. It's the only program in the New York State mental health system that allows people to really determine the content and character of their own services. And in the demonstration pilots in New York City with community access and here with independent living in the Hudson Valley, we've seen tremendous favorable results and outcomes with people reporting better self-esteem, greater confidence, better retention on their jobs, better nutrition, dealing with other comorbidities outside of the mental health. But people are joining gyms. People are picking and choosing and selecting services and goods outside of the traditional provider systems, which is very important to have that option for people to choose from. Not everybody fits into the existing traditional modalities of services. We know that. Having a consumer-directed model does allow greater flexibility and will reach a lot more people. And I agree with Commissioner Sullivan. It's not easy right now getting the self-directed care pilot embedded into a managed care infrastructure. That's the targeted goal. We should really continue to embrace self-directed care and not give up on the challenge ahead of us.
Doug, Keith, you want to say a word or two?
Yes, thank you, Harvey, and thank you, Doug, for sharing that critical history of the self-direction service model and showing that it's been successful in other places. I'm Keith Aguiar. I'm the program director of Community Access's self-direction program, and since 2017, Community Access has been one of the 2 pilots delivering this groundbreaking service that supports personal choice and economic empowerment in mental health recovery. We're one of the most effective methods currently available to pay for social determinants of mental and physical health. And it's the future of mental health care in New York State. And in a Medicaid environment where value-based payments and innovative approaches to care can support whole person recovery. Up to now, Community Access and Independent Living Incorporated participants have accessed about 1,200,000 in funds to complete over 7,500 purchases on unique things related to their goals, such as transportation that's needed, specialized therapies, work clothes, gym memberships, acupuncture, personal training, traditional therapies, one-on-one tutoring, and home organization services, just to name a few. The pilot participants routinely describe their experience with self-direction as transformational, with one participant stating, "Before self-direction, no one listened to what I thought I needed to feel better. New York is changing that. Self-direction is changing that." The initial evaluation of New York self-direction shows very promising results across the country. And we've seen that community access participants alone have achieved more than 750 personal wellness goals towards their physical, mental health, education, and employment. We're asking that Rather than eliminating the program at the end of 2021, as has been proposed, that we extend the pilot funding at its current level and build upon success to expand self-direction to every corner of New York State. And we ask that the state further its commitment to keep the program funded until the service can solidly transition into Medicaid managed care. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much. Eileen, do we have any legislators that have arrived, or can we keep going back to the issues?
We can go back to the issues. I haven't seen anybody yet.
Okay, why don't we hear, oh, Matthew Petit's back. All right, why don't we hear from Doug? And let me just say again about self-directed care. Every community should have self-directed care. Think about it. You can stay in programs forever talking about work, or you can get an internet connection, fix your car or get a transportation card, get support, do a resume. Let's stop talking about going to work and give people what they need to go to work. Okay, so Doug is a member of the Most Integrated Setting Coordinating Council that the Commissioner talked about, along with I am, and Matthew is the chair of our employment committee and testified recently at a hearing. So I wanted to give them a chance to say a few words about community integration and what state policy can do to advance that. So Matthew, if you would turn on your camera, if you're back, and Doug, if you want to start, that would be great.
Sure. Great. Thanks again, Harvey. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, the Olmstead decision of 1999 was a Supreme Court ruling that mandated all states in the country develop a most integrated setting law. And New York State adopted the most integrated setting law for New York in 2002. And then shortly thereafter, a commission was created, or the MISC, the Most Integrated Setting Coordinating Council, which really is charged with designing and implementing a strategic plan to ensure that all people with disabilities in New York State are being served in the most integrated setting. And it seems like that commission has waived, it sort of waned over the years. And in fact, it was on hiatus for about 2 years until last year we were able to resurrect this. And there are several state agency representatives on the commission, and there's also 9 community members. Harvey and I are both community members with several of our other friends from the disability community. So there's a very strong cross-disability representation on that committee. And so one of the most prominent issues that we've been faced with is the whole issue of nursing homes and the number of deaths in New York State. And, up until recently, we didn't have accurate data. Now we have more accurate data that's telling us between 40 and 50%, I would say closer to 50% of the deaths in New York State actually occurred among nursing home residents, whether it was in a nursing home or in a hospital. 40 to 50% of those deaths happened among nursing home residents. So, I mean, that's a critical part of Olmstead, is assisting people to get out of nursing homes, to get out of institutions. The most integrated setting law is really about facilitation of the deinstitutionalization movement. I mean, we recognize that deinstitutionalization is still a critically necessary part of our work. And the Most Integrated Setting Coordinating Council has an old plan from 2013. It needs to be updated. And recently we came together as the community members and we identified 4 critical committees. One that is called the Deinstitutionalization Committee. So we can continue to work on institutions, including nursing homes, with the ultimate goal of the phased eliminations of nursing homes as we know them today. Even the best nursing home is not a good place to be. We all know that. There's an employment committee, and I know Matthew's going to talk about that momentarily. There's a state plan revision committee, and then there's a community supports committee, which will emphasize stronger connections and cooperation between state and local governments and community-based organizations. So I'm going to stop there, Matthew, because I know you have a lot to say about employment, which is another critical prong of the Most Integrated Setting Coordinating Council work.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you for your work. I've been on the MISC for forever, and I think it wasn't until you got here that we really are kicking you know what. So thank you for all your work here.
Thank you, Hart.
Matthew.
Yeah, thank you, Doug, and hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to address friends and family of NIAPRS, including policymakers and public servants. So I think when we're talking about employment, it's clear that employment rates can help balance New York State's budget in terms of increased revenue. More people are working, there's more tax money coming in, and people may rely less on public benefits a little bit. But one thing that's very important is for us not to forget about our commitment to community integration as a fundamental civil right. As a person in recovery, I must attest to the positive impact employment has had on my own wellness. It has provided a way to divert my attention from the effects of past traumas and to refocus my attention on serving a purpose larger than myself while developing healing connections with others. So as someone with a disability who has had to live and receive services in restrictive institutional settings, I'm thankful for those who came before me. They fought hard to be deemed capable and worthy of participating in community life. We have made some progress since the Olmstead ruling. Let us continue and address the next phase of preventing institutionalization, whether in a mental institution, general hospital, prison, or jail.
Thank you, Matt. You know what I want to do is to just pause a little bit because Senator Brooke has shown up and they're on a very tight schedule. So I'll get right back to you as soon as the senator is done. Senator, thank you so much for coming. We're off to a great start together and your staff, and we look forward to a lot of great work together. Matthew is in Rochester, and I'm sure you'll be meeting with him at some point soon.
Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. It's nice to meet you, Matthew. I didn't realize you're in Rochester and I'm in Albany right now. So hopefully you can switch that. Thank you for letting me jump in, and thank you for letting me be a part of this day. And personal thank you, Harvey, for all of the work that you and your team have been doing as we jump into our role in the Mental Health Committee and try to do all of your work justice and try to make sure that we protect a lot of the things I think I just walked in on Matthew talking about. So quickly, I just want to introduce myself for anyone who hasn't met me, which is fair because I'm about 50 days in as a state legislator. So I'm Senator Samra Brook. I represent the 55th New York Senate District. So it turns out that's where Matthew is, which covers parts of Rochester, but it also has other parts of Monroe and Ontario counties in that region. And it really is an honor to be with you all today. I'm sorry it can't be in person, but I am confident that next year we'll all be gathered together to talk about these very important issues. But the one thing I'm encouraged by is that groups like yours have been able to show the importance, to share the narratives, to call on our leaders and really force these conversations, even when it has to happen virtually. And in some cases, I think it's even more powerful because we really do get enraptured by folks' experiences and the needs for some of our mental health supports. So many of the priorities that this association has outlined for 2021 really echo a lot of the priorities that I have also identified in my role as the chair of the Senate Mental Health Committee. Things like unresolved trauma as the root of so many of these challenges that I think a lot of New Yorkers are facing. And, you know, right now, as we think about COVID-19, there's even more trauma that is being heaped on our shoulders. And certainly folks who needed support before, those supports only need to increase. And the fact that we are in a position where we are looking at a decrease in any sort of mental health support is unconscionable, and it's something that we really do need to be fighting for together. On that vein, I'm happy to share with you all some of the things I've done in my time here so far around these issues, including two pieces of legislation, one of which some folks probably heard the tragic story with the 9-year-old girl just a few weeks ago who was clearly in a moment of induced trauma and stress and anxiety, and she was 9. And she was pepper sprayed by the people who are supposed to protect her, law enforcement. And so we introduced a bill to say, you know what, let's find other tools as to how we're going to help support and nurture and heal our young people, and chemical irritants can't be one of them. Because we all know now that trauma will live with her. that young girl becomes a young woman, becomes an older woman holding on to this trauma. And so now we have the work to try to resolve some of that and help her heal. The second piece of legislation is Daniel's Law. Many of you might be familiar now. Almost a year ago, Daniel Prude lost his life in police custody in the city of Rochester while he himself was in the throes of a mental health crisis and substance abuse crisis. And instead of getting a public health response to help him heal and support him through that process, he actually lost his life. And so Daniel's Law would allow us to use a public health response, to have practitioners show up when someone is in that moment of crisis and have them give the tools necessary to help get someone through that acute moment of crisis, and then hopefully through the continuum of care to make sure that they're able to heal and move on, and that people aren't losing their lives. The third one I know is a big piece, priority for you all, and I am so proud to have just joined as a co-sponsor for the HALT solitary confinement bill. This is something that as a constituent and a New Yorker, I have heard about for years. And when you step into a position like this, to be able to sign on to something that you know in your gut is the right thing to do, it feels powerful to be able to join you. And I hope that we will be able now with a even bigger coalition, those of us who have just entered the relay, but many of you have been running this race for quite some time. I do hope that we're able to finally push that forward. And again, realizing that sometimes even in protecting someone's physical health, folks do not realize the detriments that we are creating for someone's mental health. And those are so often the struggles that are more silent, that are harder to see, and that really take folks like the over 100, I think, right here today who are willing to do that work, make sure that our leadership is responsive, compassionate, and committed to addressing these challenges. And that is all true for me. And I know that you all are really leading the charge, and I am happy to be here as someone to amplify, as someone to work with you, and for right now to work to make sure we get some justice for mental health needs in our budget, and then far beyond that to work together on legislation that's going to help us support our community. So I can't thank you all enough for joining us, or I'm joining you. I can't help but thank everyone for being here today and for hosting this, and to everyone sharing their stories. As a legislator, it's really powerful to listen to. And I remember them, I think about them, I cry about them sometimes because they are powerful, but it is the fuel and the fire to keep us going. So thank you all.
Senator, I really want to thank you. I didn't say the senator is the new chair of the Mental Health Committee, and she joins Aileen Gunther, who you're going to hear from in a minute. Both very passionate, very powerful. It's great to meet you, Senator. And as a matter of fact, we get to meet, Matt and I and Doug will be meeting with you at 1:30, I think, to go into more detail. So thanks so much for coming out. I can see in the chat box how impressed folks are, and I see why. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. So we're going to hear from our old friend, Assemblywoman Aileen Gunther, Mental Health Chair in the Assembly. And Aileen, thanks for coming on. I know you've been with us a long time and you know our issues. So if you want to comment, that would be wonderful. You just got to come off mute, that's all. No problem. Almost.
How
There you
about
go.
that?
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Perfect.
All right. Every time you get on, there's a new trick to the trade. And of course, my children are great, and my grandchildren are great at the computer, not I so much. So I listened to my new companion from the Senate, and very nice to meet you. This is the first time we've met. Of course, none of us are in Albany. Otherwise, we would have met sooner than later. And I think she'll be a great partner for me, carrying bills. I in the Assembly, she in the Senate. And bottom line is, Tom, he gets me ready with all this written things that I'm supposed to say, but I'm not going to do that because I'd rather hear from you than hear from me. But what's important to me is at this point is the investment by the governor, by the Senate, by the Assembly and the mental health community. They have been starving us for years. And I don't know how many times we can scream from the rooftop that this has been a difficult year for all of us, and especially those who have had past diagnosis of mental health issues. And beyond that, people that have had new onset of anxiety, paranoia, and many other diagnoses across New York State and across the United States. So now is not the time. And I know, Harvey, you never like to see anybody languish in a hospital bed. I know you don't. But we know that we really sometimes need acute care for a little bit to stabilize a person and get them ready for discharge and make sure that we have a care team post-discharge. And right now, all of those things really are not happening. You stole our social workers away from school. You stole clinical psychologists away from schools. And now we are in a situation that we never knew before. And I think it's crisis and critical that we continue to lobby for more money. I mean, I'm actually frightened for this generation growing up after all of this they've gone through. My son is a teacher. Sometimes you're not teaching when you're online. These teachers are talking to these kids. Sometimes their parents are working, they're home alone, and it's really going to have an impact. So I guess it's the beg for money at this point. And I know my counterpart in the Senate understands that. I know that we could all talk about incidents in our community of different people, but at this point, you know, cutting $22 million, $22 million, siphoning off millions of dollars, closing beds, and that's $22 million. And will it be reinvested? I don't know, and it should be. So that's all I have to say. So we have to work together. First and foremost, we got to work on this budget.
Aileen, thank you so much. And I know, by the way, we were listening to Doug and Keith. I know you're a fan of self-directed care, and I want to thank you. And we hopefully will get a restoration. I want to tell a little story here. I believe that disclosure is one of the most powerful anti-stimulant things. So when I talk in Albany, I frequently say some version of I have mental illness. And the other day, a couple of years ago, I said to Aileen about an issue. I said, you know, I have a mental illness, and she said, Harvey, everybody in Albany knows you have a mental illness because you never stop talking about it. So I just wanted
I didn't mean, I meant that with all love and tenderness.
Oh, I know you did, but it was just about disclosure. I took it as great. People, I know I'm identifying that way.
You know, Harvey, I have never met anybody, not anybody, that hasn't been impacted or had moments. I mean, when my husband died so suddenly, I had 3 kids at home, and man, I was running for help. I really was. And you know what? I feel that with the help that they received, they were able to proceed with life. And I believe it to the, and people say that don't be embarrassed, man. I don't know. It really helped. It really, really helped. And I have, even myself, decisions and all that being, with somebody for 19 years. So, I mean, we've all had those moments of depression, and especially, anxiety. I mean, identify it and help people along and, talk about it. And the only way you talk about it is if we have people like you and we invest money, that you have an outlet to be able to talk about it, whether it's on in a newspaper, speaking to groups. And we need that. And right now, more than ever, we need it for children. We need it for families that are losing their loved ones left and right, their parents. I mean, this is a time when there's going to be, and I hate to use the word, an explosion of needs.
I just want to thank you. And one last thing, we talked earlier about we're against Kendra's law, and we don't like outpatient commitment. And several years ago, Aileen said to me, I know you're against it, but what are you for? So we came back with a model that's peer-led and that engages people that everybody says can't be engaged, and Aileen funded it. And that program in Westchester got 80% of people that they said would never agree to get help or participate. So really, and it's really a program that has national interest, and I hope we can refund it because it ran out of money last year. But I think you,
Harvey, you
your
have to
program-
send me you need to send me a letter today. Did you
I
already
will.
send a letter?
I did, but I'll send it. I sent it to.
Just
yes, I'll
send
be-
it again. Tom probably has seen it.
Yeah, I'll send it again. I'll send it. We have
again.
we have
And I
the.
would send it to the senator so she can advocate on her side too.
We will do that. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Elaine. Okay, let's see. We only have a few minutes left, so thank you, Assemblywoman. I think we're going to go to the next speaker, who is Matthew. Did you want to finish up on employment? You've only got a couple of minutes, though, Matt. You maybe got 3 minutes.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, Eileen. I'll send you that document. Okay, Matt, 3 minutes.
Yeah,
please.
just to finish up here. So now is the time for the work of comprehensive systems change around employment. We need shifting of some resources towards integrated employment assistance and supports, and we need measurement and accountability. We're going to call on our legislators to help with some of that accountability. We also want to see peers are champions, and they could really influence the system, and we need that kind of culture shift. So we need peers to continue to be invested in. Last but not least is the Medicaid buy-in for working people with disabilities. We need to continue to track that. In the report, one of the recommendations was to get that on an online portal. Right now with COVID, now is the time to really look at that, to get more, it's a benefit that people are entitled to, that they're having a hard time accessing. I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you, Harvey, for your service and the opportunity to provide these comments.
And thank you, Matt, for being such a passionate board member and leader. One other thing we're not going to be able to get into detail about is you heard about Oasis and OMH, and there's our friend from New York, Angelia. We'll talk with her in a minute. We're talking about, the big deal, the merger, consolidation of Oasis and OMH. So there's a process ahead. We want it to be more consumer centric. We're not sure that it is. And so we'll all be fighting to do more of that. And I know, Angelia, you and I are co-chairing a group as that part of that process. But, Oasis and OMH consolidation is not getting off on the right foot by not involving consumers and consumer input enough. And, I've complained to OMH about it, and I'm trying to complain to my colleagues who've left that out. But thank you, Matthew. And let's move over to the trauma people. So Sean, you want to put your camera on, and same with Chris and Jamia. So you are the last speaker, Sean, but you only have 5 minutes because I have to have Angelia, and then I have to blend to a role play. But I know we've had you every year, so please take it away.
Yes, thank you, Harvey, for having me back again this year. Last year, we had a lot more people surrounding us on the stage at the Egg, but it's a privilege to be here. I am the founder of Brain Food Garden Project, as well as being a member of the New York City Trauma Informed Approaches Learning Community and the relatively newly formed New York State Trauma Informed Coalition. I am, as Harvey says, he says all the time, I am someone with lived experience, and particularly around trauma. I'm not afraid to say that. It is because of this amazing peer community that I am where I am today in regards to my trauma recovery. And I've really been thinking a lot lately about policy and executive order. And I have to say that with what has recently transpired in our own capital, that our public figures have seen firsthand what a traumatic experience can do to one's life. And I would hope that with all of the other things that are happening, whether it's COVID-19 and the trauma that is impacting Americans every day and New Yorkers every day, whether it is the forced caging of children and the generations of trauma that will come out of that for them, whether it is racism and the horrible stink that what continues to be police brutality against people of color, as well as transgendered people of color who are being murdered on a regular basis in this country. I would like to hope that all of those things would make our assembly people and our senators even more interested in making trauma a focal point in New York State. You know, every piece of legislation you create has the potential to either create trauma or heal trauma. Kendra's Law, a perfect example of creating more trauma. And a piece of legislation that was introduced last year by Assemblyman Andrew Hevesy, which would actually amend our New York State Constitution to include trauma-informed approach and care as a right by all and for all New Yorkers, is a piece of legislation that has the potential to heal trauma, as well as make New York State a leader in trauma-informed approach and care throughout the country. So I will leave it at that, but I do hope that as you approach and discuss with all of your, with all of our assemblymen and senators and book your appointments, that you will keep in mind Andrew Hevesy's brilliant legislation, and that we will be able to get a constitutional amendment incorporating trauma-informed approach and care in the near future. Thank you again, Harvey, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, have pleasure with you. Is Chris or Jamelia going to speak? Are they with you?
I don't know. I was just told I was going to be the only.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll take your point, and thank you so much. And I just want to say in a minute, remember, okay, there's a lot of issues here today. You only have to pick a couple. It's too much to pick your favorite ones. Look at the list. It's restoring money for services, releasing new money, supporting housing, halt the torture, solitary confinement, peers rather than police, no forced treatment, inpatient, outpatient, crisis stabilization programs, self-directed care, adult home resident advocacy. We have a ton of issues. It's too many. I know it's too many, but these are all part of our family. And these are all issues that we can't ignore. So don't get overwhelmed, please. Pick a couple of issues, bring the book, send the book, email the book, pick a couple, and the staff, their job is to read all this stuff. So they'll read all the other pages. Pick a couple that matter to you, give some examples. So it's my pleasure to introduce my new friend, Angelia Smith Wilson, and she heads up for New York, and she'll tell you who they are, but we're a natural fit. And now, especially as our worlds are coming together in a new agency, it's so important that we work together, and I know we will. So, Angelia, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you so much, Harvey, and your board and all of the advocates. You know, advocacy is right up our alley, as we just celebrated our Stand Up for Recovery Day just a couple weeks ago. So this is right where we need to be. And as you said, our fit is natural. And I am so glad that we are coming together on a number of these issues, because one of the things that we know is that these issues wrap around all of our members, right? Because these issues are not just germane to folks who report that they are members of recovery community recovering from a substance, but recovery is open to everyone, right? And everyone is in recovery from something or some sort of condition or concern. So we very much see the overlap. And so a lot of the issues that you guys have put forth, we share the same, right? We are right up there with housing. We are right up there with funding. We are right up there with peers over police, right? And peers in the professional workplace having a sense of what they bring to the continuum of treatment, what they bring to the continuum of healing. So we are a natural fit. So we look forward. We look forward to what 2021 and 2022 is going to bring us in terms of this new agency, certainly in terms of our new partnership. We know it's only going to strengthen our entire community by coming together against a lot of these issues that impact our communities. So we look forward to it. And yes, as you said, we'll both be heading up, co-chairing the recovery and stigma community. And I'm so glad that, we will have our say and we will be able to work together. So whatever we can do to continue to strengthen this movement, we will do. And I had the pleasure of presenting at your conference the year before last. And so that opened doors. So looking forward to it, Harvey.
Thank you. I just want a chance to present at your conference.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to wrap up here with Glenn Liebman. We're going to do a role play for you about lobbying or advocating, with your legislator. And again, while Glenn is coming back on, there he is. So Glenn, you and I are advocating now for what, 20, 30 years?
80 years, 100 years.
We both had a lot more hair back then. But we wanted to just really do a little role play. So we're going to pretend, you can pretend it's a phone call, in-person visit, but Glenn's going to come in and try to work an issue. And I'm going to try to make it hard for him. And he's going to show you anyway how to deal with it. So pick an issue, Glenn, if you want to do 5%, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to.
Sure, let's do 5%. Sure.
Okay. So you come in, I come out of the office. Let's imagine this is in person because we're used to that. I come out, I say, thank you. We've only got a few minutes, but we'll try to give you some time.
Right. Well, thank you very much. And the key, as I'm editorializing, as I'm speaking, the key is to be quick. The legislator is seeing how many dozens, or their staff are seeing dozens of people on a legislative day. They might be seeing 10, 15 people. So you have to be very quick, very respectful. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm saying, thank you for your time, Senator. We know we're facing a proposed 5% cut to behavioral health this year. What that means in your district, District X, is that these 6, 7, 8 programs will be cut by 5%. And what that means is people with mental health related issues, it's going to be harder for them to get services. Staffs are going to have to let people go. That's in your district. There's going to be higher unemployment rates, but most significantly, it really impacts mental health. It impacts the individual's mental health services. People are now going to have to wait longer waiting lists. People are going to be in a situation where they're going to have to possibly even lose services that lead to their recovery, that help them get better moving into the community. And by the way, by moving out from inpatient stays into the community, you're saving taxpayers millions of dollars. So they're not institutionalized. They're not going into emergency rooms. They're not going into the correctional setting. They're actually in the community where they can thrive.
Could you give me, I'm going to have to run, but could you give me an example here in Albany where, where some good services are happening of the kind you're talking about that we should restore?
Sure, there's great examples in the Capital District here. There's organization RSS, Rehab Support Services, that mostly are focused on housing, but they do a lot of community outreach as well. And they're the kind of, again, they're a huge employer in the Capital District. They're a huge employer right in your district in Albany County. And they also, when services are cut to RSS, those are programs, they run a lot of housing programs. Those housing programs now are going to be cut. The waiting lists are going to extend to longer periods of time. And frankly, people are losing jobs. And so it's both an economic driver and it's a recovery driver. And when we lose those kinds of supports and services, then people are going to be, and where are they going to end up? They're going to end up homeless, or they're going to end up, in emergency rooms, or they're going to end up back with their families. And families are sort of like, a lot of families are aging. They're in very difficult positions where a lot of the family members are in their 80s and 90s, and now their adult child is back living with them instead of living in the community. And that puts another burden on families as well. So there are so many dire consequences by this funding being cut, especially in this COVID environment when there's so much need for emergency services for mental health and crisis services for mental health.
Well, you know how this works, Glenn. We only get a small amount of money in the legislature to add to the governor's budget to put back. How much are we talking about here?
We're talking about it in Albany County. I'm making up a number.
No, I mean statewide. I mean,
statewide, we're talking about, and I got to give the state credit. They deserve some credit because they walled off residential programs from being cut. So that's important. But still, statewide, we're talking about $17 million, which is such a small amount of money in a $181 billion budget. But that's $17 million if you look at it in terms of what that impact is to real lives. It's a significant cut. So I would urge you, Senator, to really look at this. And again, we have it broken down by your county, and you can see what this means in Albany County, what this cut means. So Senator, I would really urge you to look at it and really think about what the cut is, and also recognize that we're in a COVID environment here, that we know from how many studies, study after study, New York Foundation just put out a study 2 weeks ago, the impact of the pandemic to mental health services. So we're in the worst crisis, frankly, that we've ever been in. And to have to face—
Do you think, I really got to go, Glenn. What do you think about the federal government? Do you think they're going to help here? I mean, 17 million is a lot of money. How would we?
Right. Well, again, we are very hopeful that the stimulus package, we will get, right now it's proposed in the budget that there's $6 billion proposed to be added as part of the budget right now, but the Governor Cuomo is certainly advocating for a full $15 billion. If we get the full $15 billion, then what we hope is not only will we be able to restore the 5%, restore the reinvestment. If you look at our sheet, we talk about reinvestment, restoring reinvestment funding, restoring the COLA, but also moving forward from there as well. But right now, our priority is making sure that this funding is restored, and hopefully,
some of your colleagues are saying the governor either has money he could be spending on this, or he could raise revenues in some way, or the legislature could. Where could we get more money? Is there money laying around, or is it a tax? What do we?
I mean, there have been several revenue enhancers that I know you Senator have talked about, other senators have talked about as well, that are talking about adding revenue, whether it's a millionaire's tax, whether it's a stock transfer tax, or one of another myriad of different taxes. We, from our perspective, we're agnostic about where the money comes from. We just want the money to be there. If it's a billionaire's tax, if it's stock transfer tax, or whatever it is, it's the most important thing is to get the revenue to pay, to make sure our 5% is not cut. That's the bottom line. That's the most important thing.
No, thank you for that.
Money comes from. That's all we care about.
Thank you. I really appreciate your sincerity and your facts, and we'll do everything we can. But we're looking at the tax hikes. But it's good that you're, please send us information just so we can keep on it. And I appreciate, Glenn, your work. I see you on TV and radio, and that really means a lot. We're really paying a lot of attention to that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Yep.
Okay, well, that's our program for today, folks. It started with Glenn and it ends with Glenn, and that's a good thing.
It's scary.
There you go. So please, again, look in the chat. Eileen, could you put the book one more time in the chat box? The book, please. And again, in summary, don't work all these issues, but pick one of these. Restore the money to community services. Release money that should be available by closing hospital beds. Maintain the 20 million of the budget that the governor's put in there and keep it there. Stop solitary confinement. Create alternatives, rehabilitative cells, not boxes that are torturing people for years. Fund peers instead of police, or certainly add police and EMTs. Expand crisis stabilization programs. eliminate all these proposals to increase forced treatment, restore money for the adult home advocates, restore money, it's 400,000, it's not a lot, for self-directed care. We heard about it from Doug and Keith earlier. You don't have to do much about the Olmsted plan. That's something Doug and I and Matt are doing. You should just know the administration has been more responsive than in past administrations. But money, not money, but the numbers count. How many people are working? How many people have more housing? For me, it's always about jobs and apartments at the end of the day, and how many people have more, and what do we have to do? How do we measure it? Who's accountable? Things like that. And then again, the trauma legislation as well. So thank you for coming. I'm available to do, I think we're doing some regional forums where I could do more speaking about this. Len is, I think, setting some of those up and could. But keep the fight going. NIAPRS is all about family and fight. So let's pull together, work these issues, and we'll, you have my email address. I'll pass it on to people. I may not always be the right person. But hey, thanks for coming, and we'll see you out there, okay? Thanks again.